So when we're looking at how to oversee our payroll cost, the first thing to remember is that the where we win the game is the net margin game is always in our payroll. It's our biggest expense by far. It's got the greatest potential to go sideways on us as owners. And so it's incredibly important for us to remember that when we're managing our income and our profitability, it's not just about new patients. I've had a friend tell me erroneously a long time ago that there's no problem that a bunch of new patients can't solve. And I'm always like, really? Recruiting is definitely not one that gets solved with a bunch of new patients, and profitability being in the case. So what should our payroll costs be? I know we've talked about this before, but I'm going to break it down a little bit further. So payroll costs should be 50% of what we bring in, gross income. It should never be more than that, but I'll tell you, if I'm being honest, I was always between 50 and 56% of my income to payroll. Now, how do we know how much of that should be clinical team and how much of that should be administrative personnel? Well, the statistic gets further broken down. From there, we should have roughly 30% of our income going to clinical and 20% of that going to administrative. And that, when you start scaling your practices, this is the cost that starts to really disrupt the equation, is how much we're paying directors for not treating. Remember, administrative cost is a non-revenue producing role. So we include technicians into this role, everything. I once worked with a client who was paying a technician $25 an hour. They just gave a dollar raise every 6 months, and that person was killing it. And so when we look at how to manage our payroll, the best way to do that is by looking at these percentages first and foremost. And if we're not used to doing that, I recommend starting to track it. One time I almost went bankrupt. It was because of my payroll. And so I went through it, and my coach helped me create this spreadsheet where, and I can look for it, but it was a spreadsheet that kept my 7-week rolling average of my percentage of payroll. How much of that is admin? How much of that is clinical? So when we find that our clinical team is producing relatively well and they're billing out the right amounts and they're seeing the right number of patients and we're still losing money, then we can always go to admin. And usually that's the place.